Hello, friends. My name is Andrew Sweeny from Parallax, and this is a quick plug for what we are up to and how you can participate in or support our activities. Firstly, me and Tom Amark are developing Parallax Academy. We have several fantastic new courses available. We also have a membership program that allows you to participate in live events and community discussions. Furthermore, if you become a member, you can participate in one of our study groups. And if you're interested in one-to-one dialogue, I offer what I call meaning coaching. Finally, you can simply subscribe and like our YouTube channel or sign up for our newsletter to keep abreast of all of our activities. In any case, thank you in advance for any support or good vibes or participation in this project. And please join us and help us to rebuild spirituality, rethink philosophy, and reimagine culture. So let's get started. Welcome to Parallax Academy, everybody. Welcome, Fanny. We had somewhat of a conversation at Greg Henriquez UTalk, and I thought you had a lot of really intelligent things to say about men and women, and that's why I invited you. Although I've known who you are and seen you around for a while. Yeah, especially cutting through the more reductive versions of masculinity and femininity and having a conversation about that, because it seems to be, on one hand, a very, let's say, trendy topic and a touchy topic and an explosive topic and a difficult topic. But in a way, this might be an outrageous thing to say. I think it's the topic behind everything. So anyway, I'm very happy to talk to you about this, and also to have you give a presentation on some of your thinking about the masculine and feminine principle. So if you want to just jump in and go ahead and let's do this.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll start with sharing some perspectives and thoughts, and then we can dive into a conversation from there. But what I want to start with is kind of sharing my view on the feminine and the masculine, and kind of give a foundation in a kind of framework that I've created that to me really clears up a lot of like the tension and the culture wars and the kind of distorted versions of the masculine and feminine. So kind of lay out that map, but then also talk about, based on that, kind of the different journeys that I see that like in the masculine and the feminine take, kind of like the adultification or developmental journeys, and how different they are, and what that means for contemporary society, or what that kind of means for the times that we are in now, with some thoughts, but also more questions than answers. But I think it's really interesting. I think it'll give an interesting foundation to have more conversations around. But so a little bit, just briefly, my background. I've been really interested in leadership and humans, and since forever. And during university, I started getting really interested in kind of decentralized organizing, and what kind of how internet is shaping both, I'm really in the business world, but also society at large. And about 5 years ago, I had this kind of, I guess you call it like a tantric awakening, through a course called Awakening Feminine Leadership. I took the first course 5 years ago. It's a leadership and spiritual path by Louise Alsen. And when I got introduced to this and had this kind of awakening into my body and into the feminine, it really, first it was more like a strong intuition, but just more and more I've kind of understood how this feminine energy is kind of central to kind of understand, what is emerging right now in society. And before I took this course, Awakening Feminine Leadership, I really wasn't that drawn to even looking at or using the categories of feminine and masculine. I think there's many reasons for that, but one reason was that I think a bit, mostly unconsciously, I thought of the feminine as quite weak. I'm an engineer and I've been in quite masculine context all my life, and it was almost like I didn't want to identify with the feminine because the kind of image of the feminine that I was presented with, I didn't identify with it. And also that these kind of shallow categorizations that we have when we talk about the masculine and the feminine, where like the masculine is like the active kind of, penetrating force, and the feminine is just like the soft receiving. Like I never identified with kind of either of them, actually. But then when I kind of took these courses and was supported in awakening this feminine leadership and this essence that comes through Lovisa's transmission, it had a huge, like, profound impact on me as a woman and as a leader. And when I stepped into this kind of leadership, in my organization, I saw how it impacted my team. I saw how it impacted men around me. I saw how it impacted the organization I was with, and also kind of witnessing other women who were also in Lovisa's field. I started to see these patterns, and kind of see different polarities and different ways that the masculine and feminine were showing up that felt much more true than kind of the categorization that I had been presented before previously. And these patterns also started kind of mapping into more philosophical work that I've been taking part of in, like, the whole integral world and such. And a kind of polarity map or a framework started to emerge mainly from my own experiences of me stepping into this feminine leadership that I barely knew existed, and how that impacted the masculine. And it made me realize that there's other dimensions. And one thing I started seeing really clearly is when I was showing up in this feminine, the masculine started showing up in a different way. And I started realizing that rather that the masculine and the feminine only being in polarity with each other is actually strike a very strong, like, fundamental polarity within the masculine. So there is on one side kind of this driven, passionate masculine, which is maybe the common notion of the masculine. But when I started stepping into this quality of the feminine, it started drawing out other qualities in men around me, which was a more like grounded, present masculine, which I now call the holding masculine, which is more like, if you think of the energy of like a mountain or a tree. So this, like, very grounded, present, holding masculine, and this, what I call the creating masculine, passionate, driven, executing, are both very masculine dimensions, but completely in polarity with each other. And likewise, when it comes to the feminine is not just one thing, not just this kind of receiving polarity to the masculine. The feminine is deeply cyclical. And when we talk about the feminine, we often talk about maybe, the yin of the feminine, like the soft, the nurturing, the receiving, the keeping together. And especially in leadership context, it's about, listening, taking care of the team. But that's only half of the feminine cycle. And the other half, which may be more the yang feminine, is this kind of feminine flavor that I was introduced to through Lovisa's work, which I call then the creating feminine. And this feminine is the, you could talk about like the witch or the seductress. It's the powerful feminine. It's the feminine that's kind of sourcing the life force. and these feminine kind of energies are not in polarity with each other, because that's not how the feminine work. Rather, they're cyclical, and one cannot exist without the other, because it's like the holding feminine that enables us to go down into the void, and retrieve this life force that is this creating feminine. And without, it's kind of when the creating feminine is filled up by this life force, he then steps into the holding feminine, and that's kind of the cycle of these. And I'll share my screen to share this. Let's see. So this is the map that I started seeing, that there's a polarity within the masculine, the holding masculine, the creating masculine, and that the feminine is cyclical between the creating feminine and the holding feminine. Rather than the masculine and the feminine merely being in polarity to each other. And this creating feminine is, I mean, I of course had glimpses of it, but to really immerse oneself in this kind of creating feminine power has had such a profound impact on me. Ever since I've experienced, I felt so called in to invite more women to step into this power and life force. And looking at kind of then connecting this to me a lot, like, you know, in the business world, but also society at large, what I see is that we in the business world, but also in society, we're a lot in this creating masculine. And we talk about this creating masculine as being maybe too much, or like we talk about the toxic masculine, that we're, you know, too extracting of natural resources. Things are moving too fast. So there's a lot of talk about this toxic masculine. And a lot of people talk about that we need more of the feminine, but the only feminine that we're kind of know exists is the holding feminine. But since the holding feminine, there's not a lot of women who are kind of initiated into the creating feminine. And when the holding feminine is not in contact with this life sourcing power of the creating feminine, the holding feminine rather becomes quite collapsed. And it just kind of comes into reaction to this toxic masculine. And there's this huge tension between this kind of collapsed, almost mothering figure of the holding feminine trying to kind of subdue and slow down this toxic creating masculine. And there's huge tensions in society, you know, just with the kind of the alt right and the extreme left. Like we see these huge tensions between this toxic masculine and the collapsed feminine. What I experienced when I was able to really understand how to step into and kind of be awakened into this access my own kind of life force and like my sexual power in the creating feminine. What happened is that it, as I said, pulled men back into the holding masculine. And when the creating feminine is sourcing this life force and then being held by the holding, like the present grounded presence of the holding masculine, that then creates direction so that the creating masculine can take action and unleash the power that is in the creating masculine, but without becoming toxic and without becoming extracting. And when the holding feminine is powered by the creating feminine, then she can, rather than like subduing the creating masculine, it's more about kind of keeping the energy of the creating masculine together, keeping it unified, and also knowing kind of when the cycle is done. So when the thing is built, or when the creating masculine has manifested and taken action on the direction that they've received from the creating feminine, the holding masculine, then the holding feminine can make sure that we go back into the cycle again. And what I really see is that, like, so much tension in society and so much in the culture wars because we're stuck in these versions, kind of distorted versions of the creating masculine, a distorted version of the holding feminine, and that this life force that is in the creating feminine is so essential to this emerging, decentralized, more organic, more complex society that is emerging, because it is the kind of deeper wisdom and guidance that we need to be able to kind of design and create the regenerative systems that the world needs, and we're not going to be able to do that from this this kind of lost creating masculine that doesn't have the direction from this collaboration between the creating feminine and the holding masculine. And so kind of the last piece that I want to share is then looking at also kind of the journey of the development of the masculine and the development of the feminine. So kind of looking at the masculine journey is the classical notion of this kind of the hero's journey. So it starts in the holding feminine, that is the mother, and kind of go out into the world and the creating masculine and kind of prove yourself. And then there's this rite of passage for men, you know, to go out and kind of slay the dragon and become a man, kind of in the holding masculine, and in this holding masculine, when you kind of have become an adult, then you're ready to meet the creating feminine, kind of, you know, the chaos, the life force of the creating feminine. And this is a journey where it's about like creating kind of order and stability and growing up. So one way of you could talk about the sutric and the tantric. So for the men's journey, it's really about kind of honing and becoming skillful in the sutric realm to be able to meet the tantric realm. And this is the classical hero's journey, you know, that almost all kind of developmental psychology and such is based on. But then when I look at the journey of women's development, and here, like I definitely want to do more research, but just based on my own experience and seeing that there is not that much research looking at kind of the feminine, what's the heroine's journey, so to speak. Because what I did read one version of the heroine's journey that was basically the feminine does the hero's journey, kind of lets go of the feminine, does the hero's journey first, and then realize, you know, has slayed the dragon, has conquered and won the thing, and kind of succeeded in the masculine realm, and then realized like, was this it? And then there's like a reconnection to the true kind of feminine power, and this was definitely the case for me. But I'm really wondering if this has to be the case, or if this is just like the heroine's journey just looks like that because we're living in a very masculine society. And I'm really curious, or just like an hypothesis or an idea, is that actually the heroine's journey, or kind of the journey of becoming an adult for a woman, is the exact opposite order as for men in the masculine, so that it would look like that it starts in the holding feminine with mother, but that women's journey is to kind of go down into the creating feminine, to you know, be taught how to be with your body, how to be with your sexual energy, how to be with your power, how to really, you know, be in this world with your feminine power. And when you have kind of gotten that initiation, then there's some kind of rite of passage to be able to go up and meet the holding masculine, and kind of, you know, meet the world and show your gifts to the world in the holding masculine, and then go out and you know, manifest what you're here to manifest, and then the cycle kind of repeats. And in a way, this then means that for the feminine journey, this means that if the masculine journey is kind of sutric and then meeting this creating tantric, creating feminine, for women it's the exact opposite, that it's kind of making sure that you're so filled up in this tantric life force energy that you can kind of meet the sutric or the more ordered masculine world without losing your power, and that it's exactly like the journeys are exactly opposite. And I think this is a very fascinating thought. And then it just becomes so clear that if this is true, then so much of like developmental research, I did my master's thesis on Keegan and spiral dynamics. So I'm really deep into that work. And that so much of it is based on this kind of masculine journey of becoming an adult. So for example, in spiral dynamics, we talk about kind of this red energy, which is the, you know, like the animalistic energy that we then have to, you know, kind of that's kind of lower stages of consciousness. But for me, like as a woman stepping into my like sexual power is, to me, that's the highest level of consciousness. Like when I've had my strongest spiritual experiences, when I've been in this embodied state of kind of being filled up by my sexual energy. And you know, that's when I feel like I can just feel how the world works and just everything is clear. And yeah, it really puts everything upside down with the whole notion of adult development and integral theory. And I think, you know, it's not that integral theory, it's not that it's not true. It's just that it's the feminine lens on the world and the masculine lens are completely different. It's kind of, I mean, they're of course looking at the same thing, but it's kind of, you know, like the wave and the particle in the physics, that depending if you're looking at something from a masculine lens or from a feminine lens, you're going to see different things. And so lastly, then to then think about, so, okay, so what does this mean for society? And I think this is also like kind of a fundamental tension in these kind of culture wars between the masculine and the feminine, or between genders, because I think the masculine and the feminine need fundamentally different things for their journey. And you know, in olden days, these realms were quite separated, but now we live in a society where we're very interconnected. And I love that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it does become quite complex to know, like, basically make it simple, like, should we do sutric first or tantric first? And here's again where, like, I don't have the answers, but there's something about that, like, that the masculine kind of rules in the outer sutric material realm, and that the feminine kind of rules in the spiritual, and that it's about not saying that we have to create either a masculine or a feminine society, but that we have to create it together in a way that we're honoring both, and understanding kind of how we create together, and that maybe from like from a feminine perspective, like broadly, basically, like the feminine is committed to kind of the truth, to the real, like what the world is. And the masculine is committed to kind of building the shared stories or the structures that can manifest something in the world. Basically, I see a vision of on a really abstract level of allowing the masculine to really create these structures in society, but that they're doing so in service of the feminine. And this is what we're seeing with this kind of decentralized way of, or self-organized way of leading businesses and leading societies, that it is kind of masculine structures, but that there's a much more cyclical flow of constantly coming back to making sure that these structures that we're building are in service of this creating feminine. So I think I'll stop there, Andrew. What's
wonderful? Well, maybe I'll add a spotlight, and we can have a dialogue, if that's okay. There's so much there. I had so many thoughts that were coming to mind as you were speaking. And I had this image of the feminine trying to tame the dragon. And it occurred to me that it's easy for the feminine to tame the dragon, so it's less interesting in some kind of a way, right? Than for the masculine. Not through violence or anything like that, but through implicit power rather than explicit power, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also something about that, like, I don't know if it makes sense with the dragon metaphor, but that like there's something about the masculine that needs to tame, whereas the feminine has lost connection with some kind of power. And if we design the same journey for the masculine and the feminine, then the feminine is just going to become more disconnected. You know, like how like in tantric sexual practices, the journey a lot for the men is kind of like keeping your sexual energy in, but for women it's so much about even getting in touch with your sexual energy, which are like need fundamentally different approaches. And this, it's of course everything in the sexual realm doesn't translate to other things, but I think still there is
so that's the movement towards the holding masculine that you're speaking about, right? Holding exactly. quite literally, right? And then I guess the opposite would be true of the feminine, being this dynamic, powerful, Shakti, crazy energy that needs to come out, that is already held too tightly in, or has been trained to be too tightly held.
Yeah. And that kind of the most vulnerable thing for the feminine is to show herself in that power and in that energy. And the most vulnerable thing for the masculine is to kind of, I use the word surrender, but I talked to a guy friend and I realized I don't think that word works very well for men. But to kind of let go of control, or, and dare to be guided, I guess, by what is coming through with the feminine, but that's what's really interesting about the holding masculine. So there's this either like kind of the distorted or versions of the holding masculine is either becoming a bit collapsed, so that you're just like, I'm just in service of the creating feminine, I'll do whatever you say. Or it's, becoming over controlling and not listening and just taking direction and disregarding the creating feminine. And what is so difficult and also so beautiful when it works, and why like we really should honor men who are, being in the holding masculine well, because I think it's the most intimidating thing a man can do, but is to dare to both be open and listen, have an open heart, be there for the creating feminine, and dare to take initiative. So not just become collapsed, but have this balance of like listening and taking initiative.
Yeah, well, the collapse is the boyish state, isn't it? It's the mother state. It's the attachment to mothers. Whereas the fierce, powerful, like the holding masculine that you described, is something that is very warrior-like. It's just not warrior-like in the same sense. As let's say, divide and conquer, go out there. It's more like I think there's a higher form of masculinity that is able to contain femininity or something like that. That's how, I don't know if that makes sense to you.
It's like it's warrior in service. It's like, it's that thing of like power over or power for.
And it's also that the feminine can destroy the masculine very easily, and that's why the men tend to avoid women a lot, right? I noticed that, like I was saying this to my friend, and nobody quite got it, but especially in northern countries, the men kind of stick around with each other, and they're kind of like, whereas in the southern countries, like where you're in, right, Portugal right now, there's another sort of attitude towards women that there's a kind of like they kind of like, this is a woman, so you have to behave in a certain way rather than avoidance.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's exactly kind of showing the two different versions, where like in the north, a lot of the men are a bit, collapsed in relation to women, and in other more machismo cultures, they're a bit more not listening to women, or just power over.
Cavalier.
But then there's like the beautiful what you're talking about, where it's just like deep respect for women and showing up for women.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much, I guess there's so much pain between men and women, it seems. And it's somehow like, and that the pain is also the love at the same time, right? It's like, it's the frustrated love that men and women have for each other.
Yeah.
So I think that is like, that's why it is it's not just about psychological well-being. It's something deeply primordial, spiritual, with the whole business, right?
And I mean, this relationship with like the creating feminine and the holding masculine, like, is what creates life. And therefore it's also like the most vulnerable and intimidating thing we can do. Like it's not meant to be kind of safe, or, depending on what you mean by safe, but like it is a really, both have to really put themselves out there for each other, and have to run the risk of being, completely rejected or even hurt, but that's what's so beautiful when you get it to work. And what is so sad is that, like, we don't have these rite of passages, we don't have these initiations, like, so there's not even that many men who are taught to step into the holding masculine. There's definitely not a lot of women who are shown how to step into this creating, or how to, awaken this creating feminine. There's but like with the women on Louise's path, we take in men and we like practice standing in this polarity, and it's the most, like, it's the scariest, but also the most beautiful and ecstatic thing I've experienced. But for both the men and the women, I think, in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that in India and in some tantric circles, there are powerful women teachers that actually teach men, young men or something, or younger men. And I think, all these kind of, I think that's an interesting model that we don't really have in the West, because the men just get taught by the men and the women get taught by the women, but we don't always get taught by each other. There's not very many men who have a female teacher, and they would feel humiliated in some way or mothered by that woman. But it's another kind of relationship, right?
Yeah, I think exactly. It's that thing of like, if, I was talking about how kind of the men have to go through kind of the sutric initiation and like be ready to meet the tantric feminine. And before they've done that, like, if there's such a high risk that the men will just project the mother onto the women. But then I think there's also, I think you as a woman can, not receive that projection, or like if you're, as I guess these women in these Indian traditions, like if they're coming in from an energy where it's just not possible to project the mother onto you, then I think it could work. And also like,
that's a fierceness, right? That's the ferocious fierceness, right? Which, I think is even in some ways, I think the archetype is even, there's a fierce masculine archetype and a fierce feminine archetype for sure. But the fierce feminine archetype is pretty scary. you know.
But this is also, like from, and what I said again about, like, if you look at it from a masculine lens, you're going to see something, and if you look from a feminine, you're going to see something, because this kind of like, and this is what I see a lot kind of in these intellectual contexts, talking about the masculine and feminine, that they, like, when they talk about this creating feminine, you almost always talk about the dark feminine. To me, that's such a masculine lens, because that's just like the Madonna whore thing. Like, either it's Madonna or it's a whore, or like either it's mother or it's scary, like,
I mean, there's this book by Eric Neumann where he talks about castrating cults that existed in Crete, and there's a terror of the mother, and there's a terror of the Baba Yushka, and there's a terror. So I see. So there's but there's also this other kind of creative feminine energy that isn't fundamentally destructive. Is that what you're saying? Or
exactly. And that, like, I mean, I'm not saying that there's not dark. That there's not dark or distorted or toxic feminine at all. But what I'm saying is that, like, very very just pure feminine energies get like talked about by a masculine lens as the dark feminine, when actually like the feminine doesn't think in polarity. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's very strong polarity in the masculine, but the feminine is a cycle. Like, life is death, is life is death for the feminine. You can't, dark is light is dark. And also, like, the path that we take from Lubis, it's like it's so much about like pleasure and sexual energy and life
rather than transcendence. Maybe, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
I think the masculine is just all about transcendence.
Exactly. And that doesn't, that like, you can't use that terminology when explaining the feminine, because then and I mean, it's in a masculine context, of course, that's the language you're going to use because you're using a masculine lens. But what becomes really bad is that there's so few women speaking kind of the feminine lens that, all the women are like, okay, either I can be mother or I can be bad, kind of like it's and and what I was going to say is that like this creating feminine is so much about like play and like seduction and which like has so much power.
Just the colors of life, right? Just the colors.
And it's like how Kali is smiling, like the true feminine picture of Kali. She doesn't have like this monster face. She just like has this like smile because it's destruction, but it's in service of life. Like it's not coming from an evil place. It's coming from a deep truth and just a deep deep surrendering into what is coming through you. And that's the opposite of evil.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like I like to study esoteric traditions and imagery and different things in the Jewish tradition and also in Judeo-Christian tradition. And I know that in certain cultures, like in Jewish culture, there's periods of time where this kind of there's something called the Shekinah, or it's the feminine Holy Spirit, arises, and then there's all this creativity, and then it goes away, and then the culture becomes very legalistic and dry and moralistic, and then there's other times where, okay, the feminine comes back, with its creative and destructive energy, and then you have actual things going on, like in the culture, or real art and real creativity, and there's this repressed aspect in Christian culture because there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. There's no mother-daughter. This is one of Jung's. There's no mother-daughter there, but if you look at all these little cults that were around in the Middle Ages, there were all kinds of women's groups that they weren't nuns. They weren't doing interesting things. And in the tarot arcana, there's an empress and a female pope and and all these positive female archetypes, and which are not just this reductive Madonna whore thing, but you have to kind of dig there. You have to dig to find that. Like it's not explicit in the culture so much. It's implicit as and I can really like exactly that, what you're talking about, of kind of the cycle. And I can really feel that like right now we're in that cycle where there is this like awakening of this creative feminine energy. And I feel so blessed to be a woman in these days and to be a part, like to be one of the few women right now. I mean, not few, there's a lot, but like few in percent that have had the blessing to be introduced to this energy and to learn how to embody it, because it's such an amazing place to be for a woman. And this is also what I love about like the kind of the kind of, I don't know, women's movement, or I don't know if it's going to be a movement, because I don't think the feminine works in movements, but kind of the wave that's, or the times now, that it's not like standing up for women because we need a place at the table. It's because it's like, I think that the businesses and societies that are going to thrive need this feminine energy to be able to succeed with this new, more complex kind of decentralized, self-organized way of working. So it's to me, it's just like when, in business or such, it's rather than like, please let me in. It's like, if you want to succeed, like this is where the magic is. I mean, it becomes a necessity, and it's not an emancipatory program anymore. It's just what we need. I was thinking about this, like, me and Tom were talking about this. If you look at Greek gods, there's always Greek gods and goddesses, and they're equally powerful, right? So, and we have this kind of illusion that the women's emancipation is this modern thing that, that happened, with the invention of the birth control, and whereas the powerful feminine, character, personas and archetypes are always there, right? They're just either present or they're hiding, or I think.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, this is so true. And this is also a thing, like, of course, this feminine energy is always there. And it's the creation of the world. Like but the question is, like, will we humans be able to dare to welcome it or not? And that's rather the question, not if it's not if the feminine is going to survive or not, like that becomes, if you think about what the feminine really is, that becomes quite just funny.
Well, what would that mean then? Well,
for humans embracing it, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so again, I think it's different for, and now I'm only speaking about men and women, and there's roles in between there as well. But if we just look at those two categories, I think for men, it means to what we talked about, to dare to stand in this place of the holding masculine, where you dare to kind of both deeply listen to the feminine and deeply kind of, it's like this, like the feminine kind of rules in the kind of like spiritual world, or, the spiritual realm, or kind of the energetic, what's fueling everything, and the masculine kind of rules in the manifested world, the material world. Like, men are just physically, stronger usually than women, and that has this interdependence. So it's kind of surrendering to the interdependence we have for each other. I think I'm going off on a friend of that.
Yeah, it's surrendering, but yeah, I get a resistance in there when I hear the surrendering. You talked about that before, because I think there has to be a powerful no in the masculine. Yeah, right. There has to be a uncompromising quality, so to speak. So it's surrendering. Surrendering feels like compromising, on some level. I know it's not, in the sense that you're
talked
using,
about it
but
also.
Again, I think you're talking in the feminine terms, as you
exactly.
were saying.
I have to find a better word.
Yeah.
We were talking about that it also, and like for men, it's about like war, like surrendering in war, of like giving up kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is, and it's not giving up. It's like, it's allowing. It's not giving up. It's like showing up. It's stepping up. It's like being truly there. So for the masculine to really, but it is a kind of letting go of kind of your ego, or letting go of control, and realizing that, like, you're not the one, you are the one steering the ship, but you're not the one deciding which way is the best, like where we're going, if that makes sense. Like, you're the one.
It's a question of presence or something.
Yeah. So it's this deep presence. And then for women to dare to, for women, it's a surrender, but not a surrender in like let go and receive, but allowing this life force to come through, allowing like your deep essence to be seen by the holding masculine. So like for this magic to happen, and this kind of guidance that we need in society, it's both requires that men like are there standing up like in deep respect for women, and are really in this like deep presence, deep listening, and deep power of like when they've heard something to dare to take initiative. So it's that holding them, and for the creating feminine to dare to show herself to men, which is equally intimidating for women. And it's like the most intimidating thing both can do. And that's, I mean, that might be quite abstract, but like, that's what I see more of, those meetings between the masculine and the feminine, regardless if it's in men or women or something else, but like between those two qualities of like the Shakti life force of the feminine, and the presence, and holding of this holding masculine, that then.
Yeah, because I think the Shakti just destroys men in the beginning, right? When they first meet it, and they don't know what it is. And I mean, I think that happens to most men. And then they get angry and bitter because they don't understand. And the women are angry and bitter too, because we're both looking for each other, but in the wrong ways,
Exactly.
or something like that.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And the men are like, or the women are telling the men, like, we just want you to surrender. And the men are like, no, but
Yeah,
that's
no
not what we
fucking way.
mean, you know?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not what we mean.
Yeah.
Exactly that. And
Yeah, it's like we're talking a different kind of language, and we're about the same, about different, we both have a different view, and it takes a long time to really understand each other in a sense, right?
yeah.
Like, even though we live together, we work together, we're always together, constantly together, but I still feel my wife is a total mystery to me. Like, it's like it's like the most complicated, it's learning about each other is so such is a lifetime job, I think.
And the thing is, like, we're never like the feminine will never understand the masculine and the other way around, because they're just so, they're so fundamentally different. And I mean, we all have the feminine and masculine inside us, so I'm speaking more philosophically or abstractly, but it's like my friend said something about trust. Like, trust, if you already know what the other person is going to do, that doesn't require trust, because then they're going to do what they said they're going to do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Trust is when you don't know the outcome of the other person and you just trust them that it'll work out. And it's that kind of trust. It's like, I can't control the holding masculine to hold me exactly the way I want, or da 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 da. It's like, I trust that when I show up in my life force, that he's going to be there. And it's the other way, like the masculine can't trust that he won't, get completely overrun by this life force, but like, he just has to trust. And of course have discernment, because, again, there is toxic and distorted versions of both. But yeah, more trust, and then to get that virtuous cycle between the masculine and the feminine going, rather than this. But again, like there's not even that many men and women who are taught to even step into the holding masculine, or taught to step into the creating feminine. Like, men are just told, like, the toxic creating masculine is bad, like, and then so, but or you be more feminine. But like, I think
we have to learn to, like, also to fight with each other a little bit, in the good way, like, the Taoists call it the flowery battle or something. Like I think one of the problem is we're so afraid of each other in this age of, and everybody's so hypersensitive that there has to be a context. Yes, a safe context, but so that we can fight through our things sometimes. Does that ring true to you? Or
I think that will probably ring more true for men than for women.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Kind of that word. But what I think, what I hear under that, or like what does ring true for me, is that, like, life emerges from polarity, from creative tension,
from sparks of polarity. Yes,
exactly. Yeah. And this is, again, that's why it's not safe, because if it was safe, I'm not saying that you should go into places that you're going to get harmed, but what I'm talking about is that it requires trust. It's not known, it's unknown, and it's vulnerable, and requires trust. And that's kind of that, you could see it, as a fight or a tension between polarities. But
it's happening right now, because you're saying vulnerable and all these words that are, and then the masculine is like, no, it doesn't sense being in a fight. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
It's really interesting to, like, see the words that really, like, spark or work, with men.
Well, a lot of guys just buy that whole thing about being vulnerable all the time, and that destroys them. I'm sorry to say that, but do you know what I mean?
But what I really think that I mean when I say it's being connected,
it's something else. I know you're talking.
It's being connected to your heart. No, it's being connected to your heart. I think that's, like, the thing. And the heart is, like, strong. It's not collapsed and just receiving, like, the heart. But it's when I believe that the masculine, like, becomes distorted or dangerous, is when there's not connection to the heart.
For sure.
Yeah, so it's being integrated, it's the both the kind of adult and mature version of the holding masculine is integrated. Like, it has its like root, core, energy connected to the heart with the mind, like being integrated.
Oh, interesting. I was thinking about your presentation. I was thinking about you're using kind of diagrams from engineering, and I was thinking that's like, it's a very like, I know we know a lot of philosophers, and in our networks, and they're very hyper conceptual, and they have diagrams, and they have stages and steps, and they have this sort of like they have to put things into conceptual categories, and all that. I'm kind of like I think I'm in a sense more feminine that way, because I'm into all this mythology and and poetry and sort of like non-propositional thinking and being. And I probably have a philosophical side as well, but I was thinking about that. I was thinking like, so you go on a journey towards more conceptualization, and then find yourself in a male realm which feels kind of alienated, and need to rediscover your femininity. And that's almost the opposite journey for me. Like, I grew up with my mom, and she was a lesbian, and they're all artists everywhere. And I had long hair, and I was imitating women, and I wasn't interested in men. And so that I had to go through this process of rediscovering the masculine, and finding value in logos and rationality and straightforwardness and directiveness and getting shit done and all that sort of thing. Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway.
And I mean, like the journeys of the masculine and feminine that I was talking about, of course, like very stereotypical and kind of abstract and philosophical and one-dimensional in a sense. And like, exactly like the journey, your journey and my journey are kind of examples of the in-between people who exactly are the ones that can kind of maybe understand both worlds, and therefore
like we can talk and yeah. I remember your group with Lovisa came to our men's circle. That was last year, maybe, or maybe a bit before. And it was really, I was laughing about it afterwards, because you were so focused on embodiment and emotion and feeling. It was like everybody was getting a headache because these guys were so hyper conceptual, and the women were going, I got a headache, I can't stand this, and then the men are like, what is that, new age nonsense. And so it was very interesting to see those two. But again, I think there are certain people, Raven's here. Raven's very good at coming in and out of the masculine and feminine. She can be hyper conceptual and and also be very feminine too. I think some of us are sort of able to go into both worlds, and other of us are kind of we're stuck in more traditional kind of states or roles or modes of being. But I think the yogic journey is about kind of like embodying the other in some kind of a way, or knowing the other, or going as far into the other as you can. Yeah.
I mean, I agree. Like everything needs, if you talk about these kind of 4 dimensions, like everything needs all 4 to be able to be healthy and thrive and exist. Like life needs, whether with that's, in a group or in between people, or like it needs all 4 dimensions, and every human needs all 4. And I think there are kind of biological differences statistically for most men and most women, and then there are people who are in between. But the thing is, like, why I think it's so important to allow kind of the men who want to go on a masculine journey, and the women who want to go on a feminine journey, and then allow everybody to do what they want, but that there's so few role models in the creating feminine, and there's so few role models in the holding masculine, and precisely because they're so in polarity, like of their qualities or how they show up, you can't do both at the same time if you're learning. Like it's really difficult to really embody yourself into the creating feminine, like to this life force, if you also have to be responsible for like the direction and creating the holding and the presence from the holding masculine, like it's really advanced practice to do those two things at the same time. So that's why I really think there needs to be more spaces where those who want to can only go into the creating feminine, and those who want to can only go into the holding masculine. And then when there is enough people kind of, as I said with Louisa's, that we're taking in men, like that kind of, because what you're talking about, like when you are fully integrated, is I don't think it's the path for everyone. And also it's really advanced practice. And especially since the feminine has been so kind of suppressed in our society for like hundreds of years. It's so inbuilt into so many women, so much shame around it. So if you do a little bit of the masculine, a little bit of feminine, the risk is that it's only going to be the masculine because there's so much resistance to embracing the feminine.
Well, I think men's groups and women's groups are essential. We know that because when a bunch of men get together, they just suddenly they can be earnest and sincere and heartful with each other, and they drop their game and it's like the heart like as you called it, the heart begins to express itself, whereas in their ordinary life they're guarded all the time, and they've got this armor. And I imagine it, like I remember Camille Paglia talking about, in the scene Ulysses where the ship arrives and there's a bunch of women all together and they're, watching stuff and they're dancing, and there's this incredible joy of being together for the women. And I think it's a different, maybe it has a different style and flavor, but I think we have to do that and then come together. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's like we're coming up to the hour. Maybe I should invite there are a couple of people who are here and they've come and gone. And before other people leave, maybe other people want to come and join the conversation. We have Raven and Adrian. Are you guys there? Would you like to join in and add some new insights and energies to this conversation, perhaps?
I think it's been really great just listening to Riff. So let me think if there's anything that I have to add, that I feel like I really got to add in here.
Do you have a camera, Raven, or do we get to see your face? Or do we
okay.
Okay.
I'll have to get some light in this room. Okay, give me 1 second here. It's getting dark here.
For some reason I can't.
Hi.
Hey.
Good to see you both. This is amazing. Fanny, your energy is just like, bam. It's just like so high. Like I'm getting high listening to you. It's like, I'm like, wow. So that's exciting. Yeah. And Andrew, I didn't realize you were raised by a lesbian.
Oh, yeah. Well, not raised, but yeah. But around 14 or 15. Actually, I wasn't raised by the couple living together, but my mother was with a woman for many years. Yeah, after she divorced my dad. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I want to say it explains a lot.
Oh, really? Why? What does it explain?
I think, like you said, your interest in mythology and just like there's this kind of softer feminine energy and way of being that you have that sometimes comes into it just as a very different flavor than what you get like on the IDW, which is very masculine space. Like,
they're all philosophers. Yeah, they're logocentric philosophers.
Yes, pride themselves. I guess I'm curious if Fanny, like, are you working on a book? Are you creating anything that can really go dive deep in like a holistic way to talk from the feminine perspective? I think that that's one of the points that you make that feels so important, is that like embodying and speaking from this feminine perspective is like creating a vantage point from which other women and even men can begin to conceptualize what it is to see and to be from this perspective. So is there a project where you're kind of trying to go deeper into this and create some sort of comprehensive, or, you know, close to comprehensive whole? What are your plans in that realm?
Yeah, well, firstly, Louisa, my teacher, is working on a book. I don't know if she'll be happy I say this because it puts pressure on herself, but I trust her to launch it in a feminine way when she's ready. But I'm really excited about that because, like you say, like it's that voice is really needed. And I've also so I've wrote in some like long form articles, and I've realized that they probably are kind of the foundation for a book. I'm planning to write this summer, and I have like an outline for a book with kind of the purpose of giving the feminine a voice, and as well as giving like a feminine perspective on the relationship with the feminine and the masculine, if that kind of makes sense. Which maybe it's both a feminine perspective and maybe like what you were talking about, Andrew, this like women kind of sharing or guiding kind of what we need from the masculine, or and also as you said, like I feel very much like this bridge builder, that I have like really deep embodiment and understanding of the masculine as well, because I'm quite like fluid in my not in my gender necessarily, but like I don't know. I'm really excited about that, and it really feels like a soul project. Like I can't decide when it's gonna come out. Like it's really coming through me. That sounded got a bit of like Jesus complex there, but you know what I mean. Like it's not.
We need a female Jesus. That's what we need, basically.
What I'm trying to say is that like it's as soon as I try to force it, or like try to like. How can I write something really smart or conceptualize about this? Like it loses that, like I think exactly what you were pointing to, Raven, about like, wow, I love your energy. Like that energy, just like the words with that energy, like that's what's needed. And like the same words, but written from a different place will like not work. Like it's hard to explain, but like there's something around that. So I'm definitely in this creative process and I feel really called to be one of those voices. And we need more. Also because like it's to me, like creating that content is such a way to engage with that energy as well. And it's such like reading about other women's stories. Like I've done a bunch of interviews with women. It's just so life-giving to read, to hear the words of these women. So yes, I guess is the short answer to your question. And I feel happy to hear that it's wanted, and like it doesn't matter. Like I need to write it either way.
It's. I feel like there's a place for it. That's this perspective that you're embodying, and there's so many things inside of what you've brought up, like hints. I feel like you're like dropping little breadcrumbs about like you'll say like, well, the feminine wouldn't see it that way, or like the masculine sees it, and I'm like, oh, what is she speaking from? Like, I want to know. Maybe it's like my conceptualizing kind of masculine really wants to hold on to something. But I because there's, I guess, you've been doing this work for many years now, so you're like advanced in terms of embodying these things, and that perspective of what's over the hill, if you invest in this work and if you invest in these processes and take the risk, I mean, it is something a trailblazing and pioneering kind of movement, I don't know, blob, that's emerging. So yeah, I feel very inspired by that. So I just love to hear more. Oh,
Yeah, I think, yeah, I do think that you have the ability to communicate, let's say, yeah, over both um both wavelengths. I don't know what, the masculine and the feminine. Whereas often, if I'll be hearing some women talking, and I feel, okay, I don't belong here. This is for the women, you know. Or in another case, this feels just like for men. But when I hear you talk, I feel your ability to move in between both realms. So that's very refreshing.
Yeah, I think it's also I think, I mean, it's due to my like fluid nature, and due to like the amazing men and women I've had around me my whole life. Like I have so little trauma from either side, and I have so much love and so much inspiring role models, and that really touches me. Like I really feel that privileged of having just deep love and respect from my own experiences, both the masculine and the feminine, and that also, like, more stories of that. Like I really think the world needs. You know?
Yeah, one of the questions I was thinking of asking you, which I never got to, so was about this mentorship business, or, you know, having a teacher. And, you know, I've worked with several teachers as well. And I think a lot of people are out there doing it on their own, and they don't have a guide, or they don't have a teacher, or they don't. So I was interested in hearing about your, you know, maybe your relationship with your teacher.
Yeah, with Louisa.
If you wanted to share any of that.
Yeah, it's really funny how we met was when I was like 25 maybe, and I was like an intern with these two guys. It was right after uni, and another woman we were also working with had like arranged a meeting with Louisa, and we all met. And I think I said like 2 sentences during that meeting, but Louisa was like, I don't want to meet these guys. Like, who's that person? Like, and then I was just this like tag along to the meeting. And then she contacted me afterwards, and she kind of became my mentor already then, but more just as like a wise person that I really looked up to. And then I think we'd been friends for 2-3 years or something, and then Louisa started talking about this sexual awakening for women and the feminine leadership, and she calls the vagina the jewel, and it was like when she started talking to me about it, I was like, this woman is like the wisest person I know, and I so deeply trust, you know, her intuition and everything she's guided me with, but on this thing, like, either I completely don't understand, or like she's lost it. Like I really didn't, like, because I was very, I wasn't in my body. And I was, I did not have that deep relationship to my sexuality. So when she started talking about like mixing, female leadership and female sexuality, and I was like, this is too out there for me. And then for some reason, she did. So how her practice kind of emerged was also like super emergent. Like she had no plan of becoming like a teacher in feminine leadership, like at all. She'd been working with women and female entrepreneurs for, like 20 years. But she had her own kind of awakening into this, and she shared it with another woman who had a lot of contacts in the business world. And this woman said, like, Louisa, can you please make a course on this I think she said female spirituality and female sexuality, and Louisa added leadership. So it was female leadership, female spirituality, and female sexuality. And they had the first course, and all the women, I think they were like 8 women or something, they were like, you have to keep doing this. Like, you have to keep doing this. And then so she did another course, and then I think I was the third one in, and I do not know why I said yes. It was called Divine Eros and Pussy Power at that time, and I have no idea why I said yes. Like, I really, really, really don't know, because I had not been thinking about feminine or masculine. You know, like I said, I was a bit, I was a bit, had some negative projections on the feminine rather than wanting to explore it. But I think my body was just like, you want this, you need this. And so I said yes for some reason. And then I was completely like, and then I just basically started inviting all the women around me to experience this, because it felt like such a gift for women. And after a couple of months, we started kind of working together more actively, kind of in a partnership, Louisa and I. And I've been supporting her in bringing women in. And it's a quite like complex relationship, because we're both like, she's my teacher, we're friends, and we're also kind of in this call together. Building something. I mean, it's quite clear, like she's kind of building her, and I'm more, we have quite different roles or skills. Like I'm more like kind of this bridge builder, and also very connected to applying this in the business world. But yeah, she's to me, I'm quite skeptical of like spiritual teachers. I think it's because I'm very, very highly sensitive. So I like feel into things very deeply, and I have such a quick brain, or like I can take in very deep intellectual concepts. So to me, it's been so difficult to find somebody to follow who both can take me on a journey in like the embodiment in the spirituality, but that I also trust intellectually. And to me, like that's the magic in Louisa, that she kind of integrates those three worlds into something that to me feels coherent. That makes sense. Yeah, I don't even remember what your question was anymore. Tell me something about Louisa, maybe. Did we lose Andrew? Is he frozen for you too?
Oh, yeah, he is frozen.
Interesting.
Okay. He's gone. Oh, wow. Oh,
sorry, everybody. I don't know what happened. I lost the wheat feed there for a second.
Wow.
Yeah, excuse me. So yeah, you were talking about your teacher and your suspicions of other teachers, and that you needed somebody who could satisfy you, conceptually as well, you're intellectually as well as, just there's a lot of flaky teachers out there, aren't there?
Yeah. And also what I love about Louise is that she's in the process herself. And I think that's such a feminine way of doing it, and needed to be a teacher within the feminine. Like, she doesn't put herself on this like high pedestal and like, I'm enlightened and I know everything. Like, she's really like in the journey together with us, but of course with like a lot of guidance and depth. But it's something about that, like she's in the emergence of this feminine field herself, and like deeply in it and deeply exploring it. Which I think can lead to like a lot of people kind of projecting different things. Yeah, there's so much we could talk about this as well, in like feminine groups or like groups of women that, also like, I guess maybe different kind of projections. And also because she's not this guru who's like, I know everything, and which in a way can be like comforting and like, holding in a way, but it's also, I don't think would ever work when it comes to the feminine. Like, yeah, she's really embodying the feminine herself, which is unusual, I think, as well. We're used to the more like masculine leadership style, which of course would be very counterproductive if she did that, since she's a teacher in feminine leadership.
Well, maybe one of the last kind of questions I could ask you is, me and Tom have this thing called Parallax. It's kind of a business in some ways, and that we're doing courses, and we have free podcasts, but we also have members and things like that, and we're sort of building a business, and we're two guys doing it. And you talked about the necessity for female, leadership and that kind of thing in business. So Maybe you could speak on that just a little bit.
Well, that's a broad question.
It's pretty broad, yeah.
But so, and one way I could frame it is like, so the business world in kind of the industrial age, it was a lot in the creating masculine. And what you needed was, maybe like one innovation or one new idea, and then you kind of built a machine on that, and it was about, executing it even more and more efficiently. But now, like, computers are taking over a lot of that kind of like efficiency creating thing. And what is needed now, like in the internet age, is to be relevant, is to attract resources and customers, is to like be able to navigate through really emergent and uncertain and complex waters. Like, it's completely different skills. And what the creating feminine does together with the holding masculine is create this deep direction that draws people in. It's like the gravitational field of a business. It's like, it's the creativity. It's that feeling when you see a brand or when you see a company where you're like, like where you lean in, like that's the creating feminine. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that you have to have a woman on the team. I'm not talking about literal, like, and it is literal, because I think most female bodies are better at, but it's like, it's that life force, that when as we move out of the industrial paradigm into this more networked age, it's this I really believe that the businesses that are able to kind of build in service of this life force will just attract customers and resources, and much better.
It's interesting, guys, because we would normally think that the IT world was and still is hyper-autistic masculine realm. I mean,
and it is like, and
maybe it's moving into the feminine or something, or needs to.
Yeah. And I'm part of initiated a project called the Cora that is about bringing in this feminine energy into Web3. But yeah, basically the kind of internet world that is emerging. And right now it's very male dominated, and it's not like, it's also because like the masculine is just inherently, in general, of course, I'm not, we have to. I'm not speaking about individuals, but like as a collective, just are more, take more risks, and, are just, so there's, I don't think that these men that are in the world of Web3 are because, they have any aggression for women or don't want women to be there. I just think that there's very few women in that world who have been introduced or have been initiated into a feminine leadership, because all the business schools and everything are about a masculine leadership. So it's the lack of women who even know that this exists. I think that a lot of IT companies would welcome it with open arms if they met it, if that makes sense. But a lot of the women in the business world are very much in their masculine.
Right. So it's a whole kind of almost a school that you're proposing here, in a way.
Yeah, like and as you like, it's not something new. I think it's this feminine energy is always there, and it's just, are we open to it or not, and are we allowing it to unfold? But yeah, and I definitely know that's kind of I think a big part of Louise's vision is like, helping many women to kind of awaken this feminine leadership.
Well, maybe we did it. Maybe that is the natural conclusion of this conversation. Yeah. Nice to see you, Raven. Thanks so much, Fanny. I enjoyed that conversation a great deal. It was really good. Thanks so much.